Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem video. This is a postmortem of my Blitz chess game number 167. I was white here, kicked off with d4, and we got into the King's Indian defense. c4, sorry, g6, not e6, King's Indian, knight c3, and bishop g7. I was confused for a second in the game because I was thinking about the Grinfeld with d5, but bishop g7 is the normal way to get into the King's Indian. So we're playing the main line here, d6, to stop the pawn from going to e5. And knight f3, castles, bishop e2. So this is the classical variation. And right here, the main move is knight c6. This is the Mar del Plata variation. White pushes on with d5, and then the knight goes to e7. And of course, many games have been played along that line. Looks like knight bd7 is the line. I think that's the Petrosian line. And then knight to a6, third choice here my opponent plays. And I'm not really familiar with this, and right off I make a move which is not the best. So here, let's take a moment to see how this should be played. Bishop e3, top choice there. And knight g4. Usually you don't like to play bishop e3 when knight g4 is available because you're just going to have to move the bishop again. But I guess it's okay in this case. You get to move the bishop with tempo hitting the queen because the knight's no longer there. And black could try f6 here, but it gives him kind of a funny structure and blocks in his bishop. So I guess that's nothing to be feared. Queen e8 is the main move, and then an exchange. It's typical. And then h3 kicking the knight, and black throws in the move h6, kicking your bishop, so the bishop retreats. Oops, sorry, not to there. The bishop retreats to d2. And knight goes back to f6. And so you can see, even now, many games have been played from this starting point. So looks pretty good. Looks like a typical King's Indian type of position, although maybe black's attack on the king side is a bit slower now. He still is going to have to move this knight again, the knight on f6, in order to get in the pawn push f5. And in the meantime, white is fully developed, so looks like a decent position for white. So that's the most precise way to play this opening. There are probably alternatives along the way too. So I didn't know any of that. I played d5. And the knight goes to c5 immediately, just attacking this pawn. And then I play knight d2. Knight d2 is not such a terrible move. The evaluation there was not so great, but oh, actually no, 65%. Actually, that's in favor of white, isn't it? So okay, so the chess engine, I mean the opening book shows that as a good move for white. Anyway, it's okay. Queen c2 is also an okay move. I looked at this game with the chess engine. I'm going to leave it turned off because I want to do some tactical quizzes in this video, so don't want the engine giving the answer away, but I'll report on what the engine says. So it thinks you know, white has some opening advantage, like is typical, but maybe not as good as if I played bishop e3 there. So a5 is a natural move, stopping b4. I was going to play b4 and kick the knight. And so I come up with this slow plan. I guess this is where I sort of lose my opening advantage. It's, my idea of playing b3, a3, and then b4 is just a little slow for this position. Queen c2 is the main move. But I go with b3, and he plays knight e8, and we're now out of the opening book. So let's just look at the notation tab. Knight e8 was played, and then bishop b2. The other idea is that this rook needs to be defended before I can play a3 and b4. So it's not just the pawn moves, but I also have to make at least one other piece move to defend my rook. So the bishop has to get out of the way. And there was no, with the knight on d2, it's sort of blocking the bishop, so this is really the only square available. So black immediately starts on his king side attack. I play f3 to shore up the center. He pushes on with f4. Now I continue with a3, he goes g5, and I play b4. So both sides are proceeding, black on the king side and white on the queen side. A very typical strategy in the King's Indian, and it's just a question of whose attack will break through first. The knight really has to move now, although he could exchange first and then move the knight, but chose to play knight a6. and I decided to push on with c5. I was thinking this is a pawn sack. Actually, I hadn't realized until this point. I've already probably gotten into a line where I'm sacking a pawn. Oh, well, I could take on a5, I guess, at this point. But if I do nothing, he can take on b4, I take, and then he takes with a knight, so I'll be losing a pawn there. So, so if I want to avoid losing a pawn, I should play b takes a5. But I thought this might be a good pawn sack. It would open up some lines on the queen side and allow me to get at this weak pawn on e6. So that was my thinking here. Black just continued. Instead of taking that pawn, he continued with his kingside play. So I grab here on d6, creating this backwards pawn that may be a target. I guess it's not a backwards pawn because I can't, there's no open file in front of it to attack it, but it is a potential weakness. And then I play knight b5. And the engine here prefers knight c4, and it thinks white's doing okay after knight c4. So knight b5, bishop d7, and then I play rook e1. So what I'm thinking with rook e1 is I want to free up the square f1 for my pieces, either the bishop or the knight, to add some more support to these my kingside pawns, which are pretty lonely over here and subject to an attack. But this move is actually a mistake. So here's your first tactical quiz. It's Black's turn to move, and what should he play? Okay, this is a pretty simple one, so pause the video and see if you can find it if you haven't got it yet. I'm going to give the answer away now. You can start it in a couple of ways, but I think the most precise way to play is take the knight first. And then if I take back, you have queen b6 check, just picking up a whole bishop. The engine even says it's best not to, not even to take back, but just to give up the piece and move your king or something. So you're losing a piece. The other way you could play this is you could start immediately with queen b6 check. It's a double attack on the king and the knight, so you're losing a piece. Either way, white is just down a piece at this point with correct play from black. So hopefully you guys spotted that tactic. Fortunately for me, my opponent did not spot it. And obviously I hadn't been thinking about it. I could have played something other than rook e1 here. I think the recommended course from the chess engine is to take on a5 first, which covers this b6 square, and then when the queen takes back on a5, then play the move a4, supporting the knight with a pawn. And that would lead to a good position with chances for both sides, as they say. Okay, rook e1 mistake, and then a takes b4 was played, not capitalizing on the mistake, but taking the pawn. And now he could, after I take back, he could still play this queen b6 check idea, but he played knight takes b4 instead. So he won a pawn. This was the pawn I had intended to sacrifice anyway. And now I take the rook off, and after this, the queen can no longer get to b6, so that fork threat is no longer in the position, and the game is about even. So even though white is down a pawn, the chess engine rates this as equal chances for both sides. So so that means white has some good compensation for the pawn. So it's a decent pawn sacrifice. Black plays queen a5, not there. Queen a5, attacking my knight, and I move it to a3. It didn't have a lot of good squares, but I'm hoping to get it back into the game via c4 or c2. And then black continues with his kingside attack, knight f6, supporting this g4 push. I play knight d to c4, attacking his queen. This was a bit of an oversight because he has a good move here, queen c5 check. So I really just force his queen to go to a good square. And now the king can go either to h1 or f1. I eventually decided to go to h1. It turns out going to f1 is losing. And we just take a little bit of a look at this. I don't have the variation here, but the problem is the queen is covering the flight squares, and the rook is pointing at the king down this file. So it just takes a few moves to open up this file, and the king is in big trouble. So king h1 was the better choice there. So after queen c5 check, yeah, I played king h1. And then he continues with g4, his plan. And I went with bishop c3. I realized actually at this point that queen f2 was a threat. It's a kind of a double attack. It's attacking my rook, which is defending the bishop. So it's not a double attack, but it's attacking the rook, and it's indirectly attacking the bishop because of the rook moves. The bishop is no longer defended. So I played this move, which was dual purpose. It defends the rook and also attacks the knight. So I thought he was going to have to move the knight. I didn't see any way to defend it. But my opponent played the very interesting move, queen f2. And I don't have anything better. So this is a piece sacrifice, and I don't have anything better than to take the piece. And right here, this is your second tactical quiz. So this piece sacrifice was actually a pretty decent sack. At first, the chess engine thinks white is just better, not by a full piece, but by a couple of pawns, 1 or 2 pawns. But as you play down the line, it turns out that it starts to like white less and less, and if you give it enough time to think, it actually rates this position as about even. So that means that that piece sacrifice was valid, and this is a very interesting attacking position for black, I mean. So it's black's turn to move here, and the move he played is g takes f3, and that's just not the right way to proceed, because after g takes f3, I just take back with the bishop, and everything is sort of holding together at this point. So the question for you is, put your thinking cap on, and think about your attacking instincts. What's the plan for black, and what's the best move for him in this position to proceed with the attack? And this is a position that's pretty deep, so it's worth thinking about for some time. And it's good to practice your attacking skills on a position like this. So see what you can come up with. Okay. Pause the video. I'm going to give the answer away now. The answer is knight takes e5, e4. Knight takes e4. A very interesting move, sacrificing a second piece but opening up lines. White really has nothing better to do than to take the knight, and then the follow-up idea is this move f3. And this is a double attack. There's a threat of checkmate. Queen takes g2 is checkmate. And of course the bishop is hanging. So there's no time to actually move the bishop away because you'll get checkmated. You could play bishop takes f3, but then the pawn comes back to f3, and there's still this threat of checkmate. That's a line that leads to chances for both sides. The chess engine thinks the best defense for white is rook to g1. And once again, at first it thinks white is doing okay here, but after the follow-up move, f takes e2, the original plan the chess engine has was to bring the queen down to b1 and then to e1 to try and neutralize the threat that way, and then it found some problems with that, and eventually it settled on there's only one move here actually that maintains equality for white, and that is the move queen e3. This also defends against that pawn queening and threatens to trade off queens. And so after this, this is a position, if you count the material, black got one of his pieces back, so he's just down one piece, and he has 2 extra pawns, one of which is this strong pawn that's threatening to queen. And the chess engine rates this position as about even, so that would be a pretty interesting way to proceed. And the game is not over by any means. I just don't want to continue the line indefinitely. There's no knockout blow. The position is about even with chances for both sides, so pretty interesting. Okay, so that's the way to proceed here. Instead, my opponent played g takes f3, which is it's a logical idea, trying to open up lines. It's just not as effective in this case because I take back with the bishop. And now I can, if he takes the pawn, I can take with the bishop, and then pushing to f3 is not effective because the bishop can just come back and take on f3. And the bishop, unlike pawns, the bishop gets to move in 2 directions. When the knight sack was played with a pawn on f3, that f-pawn moved to the e-file, and there was no way for it to come back and defend f3. So that's the difference with the bishop here. You just have stronger defense on the f3 square. So the sack no longer works. And white is basically just a piece up at this point and winning. My opponent played king h8, and I played queen c2 here to either chase the queen away or force a trade. And black's attack is pretty much over at this point, and my opponent resigned. So anyway, I thought that was a pretty interesting, instructive game. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.